I see Mike has provided quite the agenda for us this evening. So hopefully we don't go too late, but I'll leave that up to Mike.
So as I let Maria in, the first item on the agenda is an article put on by the planning board, and this is Article 16, and it's a zoning amendment for floodplain district. And Maria can speak on this for us.
Yes, thank you. So the FEMA amendment is just us trying to comply with the latest requirements from the federal government. It's something that it was outdated in the past, and FEMA is requiring every town to have an updated bylaw by the end of this year. So what we decided to do is we're following the basic Massachusetts template for FEMA flood zones. It's very standard language. Nothing really has changed. It's just updating panel numbers and such. We also had some issues with enforcement. It was really hard for us to correct when people did construction in the flood zone and they already started. We had no mechanism to make it right through our bylaws. So that's something we have changed, and we gave ourselves basically some teeth and enforcement capacities through the building commissioner. Basically, it'll be treated like a zoning violation now. So there will be different penalties, and it'll be the exact same process, same appeals period and everything. The planning board also, they held 2 public hearings on this issue, and what was discussed it was brought up by a resident was that some towns, you can get between a 0 and a 45% discount on your flood insurance and flood premiums. And Norton currently gets a 5% discount. And this resident was concerned that we could be getting more, and we could be a little more aggressive with the way we approach flood zones. So the planning board is going to take the safe route for Springtown meeting. We're going to pass just our basic, boilerplate bylaw. Because town meeting can be unpredictable, and we need to have this done by December. So that's going to be the first thing we do. And then for the fall, I'm actually going to be meeting with some FEMA people along with our 2 of our flood zone coordinators in town, the conservation agent and the building commissioner. And we're going to be discussing if there's any way that we could actually give the town of Warren residents more of a discount. There's 19 different categories through FEMA which you can get a discount. A couple of them are zoning. Some of them are actually infrastructure improvements. Some of them are like cleaning catch basins. Some even go as far as actually removing buildings from the flood zone, which is a little hard because there's a lot of houses there. So my conversation with FEMA on Thursday is going to be about how much of a discount can we really get through just zoning amendments, because then everything else would probably require us bringing in extra staff, and at that point it's a budget discussion. It's a bigger issue. And I also want to understand, if we become more restrictive through FEMA bylaws, is it really going to affect the economic development of the town or not? But I also don't want us to constrain ourselves, because a lot of the town is either wetlands or flood zone. We have a lot of that, so I want to be very mindful of what we do. But the hope is that we're going to be proposing a more restrictive bylaw in the fall. But this is just the beginning. We need to get this passed. There's nothing crazy here. We added a few definitions. Everything in yellow is something we've added. Enforcement capabilities, and that's really it.
So there is a difference between flood zones and wetlands, correct?
Yes.
So this is just dealing with the flood zone.
Yes. Yep. So the wetlands are still ruled by the Wetland Protections Act from the state. We don't have our independent wetland bylaw, so we just go by state rule. And this is just areas that in 100 years they're likely to get flooded. So that's a new criteria. It's a 100-year flood. So if you're near the reservoir, for example, now you might be in a flood zone. Wetlands is just vernal pools or swamps or any area that's not quite dry.
And at town meeting, would we be distributing like a map so people could get a visual of where the flood zones are within the town? Or no?
Those are actually, that's data that's available on FEMA's portal. They're the ones who designate the flood zones, not us. So we could at best include a link that people can browse the map panels. We also have it on our Norton GIS, but the panels are actually going to be updated again, I think either January or February of 2024. The panels we have are very old. So the panels aren't ready yet, but FEMA is trying to push the towns to get the language done. So if you'd like, we can include maybe language or a link for people to browse, but it's not a zoning district per se because it's a federal regulation.
Well, for a town meeting, I'm just thinking of people who would love to have a visual as they're seeing this, that maybe there's a visual somewhere that kind of shows, not exact, but a rough outline of, gee, we're talking about this area here and that area there. I don't know.
I can prepare a map. I don't know if the town has the capacity to print it, or even if we can share the screen or something so people can have a visual while we talk. If that would be okay, but I can make the maps too if you'd like to have that.
Well, I personally am thinking that if you or someone else is up there discussing it, that we must have the capability of a screen share, so people can at least see it for a moment during the presentation.
Yeah, I think
that's just me. I don't know about anybody else. Is that Cody?
Yeah. So Maria, I'm familiar with FEMA and the flood maps. I just want to be clear that the changes that are being implemented here in the zoning bylaws that are in the article are to adhere to the updated guidelines of FEMA?
Yes.
Okay, and is there any opportunity, or is there any chance that because FEMA has not updated their maps and the flood zones within the town, is there a chance that something that is currently in compliance through these bylaw changes and the updated maps, whenever those actually come out, will be out of compliance?
Yes, that happens all the time. I think they update them every 10 to 15 years, and it happens. People do freak out a little bit when it happens because your insurance obviously goes up, and you basically become an existing nonconformity. So you only trigger the flood zone building requirements if you are trying to add over a certain percent, like over 25% of your house or over 50% of the value of your house. That's when you need to start worrying, I might need to, elevate the house. But if you're just doing small additions or small repairs, you won't even trigger that, and there's nothing to comply with. So only massive renovations or massive repairs is when people start, worrying about all the flood proofing elements. But it does happen.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the town has absolutely nothing to do with the flood zone determinations. That is completely set by FEMA, and it's not going to be, I know this, I'm just putting it into the record. It's not our responsibility. FEMA draws the flood maps. They're the ones to determine whether or not something is in the flood zone or not. I just want to make sure that it's clear that the article here is just to update our bylaws to comply with the federal statutes and enforce accordingly.
Absolutely. Everything you said is correct. And we've had these bylaws reviewed both by our town council and by the Massachusetts representative for FEMA. They reviewed 3 different versions of this, and they gave recommendations to optimize it, and town council said, do not touch it. It's perfect now. The more we play with it, we risk losing actually the 5% discount we get, which is, again, not high, but we don't want to lose the 5%. So that's why we're approaching in the future with a lot of caution. But this has been approved by FEMA, town council. It is very standard, and we have absolutely no control over it. It's all federal.
Okay, and I think just guidance on presenting this at town meeting, that needs to be made very, very clear that this is federal and there's nothing we can do to influence this, or like the maps are what they are. And, you know, just make sure that people really understand this is updating the guidelines and updating the laws accordingly. And whether somebody gets put into a flood zone based on an updated map is completely up to FEMA and has nothing to do with us.
Absolutely. I think that that's a good point, and I'll make sure to let the residents know.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Maria, if someone goes from not flood to flood in the updated map, I know if they have a mortgage or something, their bank is going to be, you know, inundating them with, hey, you need to buy insurance and everything. But does the town at all get involved in saying, hey, you're now in a flood zone?
I think FEMA is the one who notifies that. I think it will be an undue burden on the town to have to keep track of every parcel that is or is not. If a resident wishes to contest them being in the flood zone, they can write to FEMA themselves and have an analysis done just on their whole parcel. Sometimes it happens that you might be on the flood. It's honestly only if a corner of your house is in a flood zone, then your whole house has to comply. But if only a corner of your lot is touching it and not your actual structure. So there's a lot of cases where people will write to FEMA. FEMA will respond fairly quickly for a federal agency, and they'll do a one-on-one evaluation of your house. But those are things that are completely handled by the state and the agency. Insurance, we do not get involved because that's private between the homeowners and the banks. So
Right.
The town has no say over that.
Anybody else?
Just one follow-up if I can.
Go ahead.
It's more a question for Mike Units. I just want to make sure that if there is any change in the FEMA flood zones for the town-owned properties, that we're aware of that. I know we can't predict how FEMA is going to redraw the lines, but something to be aware of, that if there are any town-owned properties that are near or abutting a current flood zone, you know, chances are whenever they redraw those maps, it's more likely than not that they're going to expand those.
We will, and I'm not so sure that FEMA doesn't have public outreach before they change maps.
Okay.
I think the proposed town hall is very close to flood zones. There's some not in the structure, but near the backyard area. Again, I don't know how that would change. Development patterns would change, the flow of, water and bodies of water also change. So maybe they won't necessarily expand. So it's a little hard to tell, but we can keep an eye out for those. It should be coming out soon.
Yeah, the new town hall and the new senior center were the two that were in the top of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Zach?
Mike, is the current parcel that's going to be the senior center in a flood zone? Or Maria, I mean, it's right on the reservoir there. Is that currently in a flood zone?
Not that I know of. I don't know. I'd have to look, but not with the buildings being built, that's for sure.
I'm not sure myself either. I know there's some flood zones that are actually not regulated by FEMA. They're not risky enough to be regulated. So even if it is in a flood zone, it might not be the dangerous kind, if you will. But that's something I can follow up tomorrow and I can let the board know.
Anybody else? Well, I don't hear anything. So Maria, thank you.
Of course.
And Maria, the planning board did already send a letter to the select board recommending this?
Yes, I sent out the letter in time for the select board meeting from last week, and planning board voted to endorse it 2 weeks ago. I can give you exact dates, but it was unanimously endorsed by the planning board to recommend this to the select board.
So
And the
this,
select board hasn't voted on it yet?
they were waiting on articles till the finance committee voted, so.
Excellent.
So if you're comfortable with Maria's presentation and the planning board recommendation, do you want to vote on this?
I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe,
I make a motion that we recommend the article for town meeting as written.
I have a
Second.
motion. Do I have a second?
Second,
And Mr. Chairman, I stand corrected. The select board did vote in favor of this article.
Awesome. Even better. So, so I have a motion and a second. Thank you. We'll go for the vote now. Sandra,
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
yes.
and I'm also a yes, so that's unanimous.
And how many is that?
1, 2,
7?
4, yep.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Have a
Maria.
great night.
Thank you.
you.
Mr. Chairman, next we have Frank Fournier from the Water and Sewer Department, who would like to speak on Articles 10 and 11, and also the water and sewer budget articles on the annual. So I'll share the screen.
Good evening, Frank.
Good evening, everybody. It looks like we're going to start off with well 4.
Article
as you-
10.
Oh, you're going up
Frank,
higher? Okay. 10?
The-
That's the aeration system. All right. Thanks, Mike. We're looking to add aeration kind of on a trial basis. This will be at our ground storage tank that's located at Cottage Street. It's a 2 million gallon concrete storage tank. And the purpose of aeration or any type of mixing device in there is to keep the water from stratifying so it doesn't break up into layers. So anytime you disinfect water, you create byproducts. And I'm sure each of you have seen the notices that have gone out for TTHM, which is a formation of a byproduct when you disinfect the water. So we are not only dealing with that in the dead-end locations of town where there's a dead-end main like Richardson Avenue or Dean Street, where there is just no way to loop the water back to the town, and there's not enough usage to continuously turn the water over. But we also see indications of some minor levels of elevation in the storage facilities when we hold on to water for a while. Basically, the same thing happens. The water age goes up, and the longer that you have contact with the disinfectant, you can also create higher TPHMs, which we're trying to avoid. So, speaking with Mass DEP, looking for permanent solutions other than the routine flushing that we're doing now, it doesn't make sense to get rid of the water in a tank, basically flush it to waste, after we paid so much to create it and store it for a while. So the next best option is to put in these mixing systems and aeration systems. And what that'll do is continuously keep the water moving, even when there's not inflow or outflow in the tank. The mild aeration will actually help distribute TTHM, so they're volatile. They easily are stripped out by air. So any of the TTHMs that do form or try to form in the tank would actually just escape through the air hatch on the top of the tank. So it is multiple benefits to this type of a situation. And it's not too often we get recommendations from Mass DEP for something, but they've seen this work pretty well in other communities that have had similar issues. And it's a relatively small investment for what could be a potentially, altering situation for the town. So that's the Article 10 that's before you there. It's the engineered estimate cost for that product.
And Mr. Chairman, Capital Committee did vote in support of this article.
Okay. Frank, the 375, is that a one-time outlay, or is there an annual then maintenance that's going to be added year after year?
That is a one-time outlay. There will be some maintenance. It is a pump and a blower system. So with any mechanical device, there is going to be maintenance, and at some point there will be a failure and a replacement. Depending on the amount of use and the amount of water that pumps through, that's going to depend on the life cycle of that type of equipment. Once the major infrastructure is in, so it has piping that gets installed inside the tank. It's attached to the walls. It's basically like a very tall irrigation system that you have on your front lawn, one of those big lawn yard hydrants. That's what it would look like for a basic description of what it would be inside the tank. When the water comes in from the inlet, it would be picked up by the pump under pressure, blown up through those sprinkler systems, and basically aerate down and cascade to the top of the tank. So it's a basic, simple system. Many of the new tanks are already designed with it, but we're dealing with some older equipment here in town, and there is no talks of anything in the near future of replacing that ground storage tank. So it's not something that we would work into a new tank, for the ground tank anyway.
Okay. Anybody else on the committee? Is that Cody?
Yeah. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Cody.
So, question on the tank. You mentioned it's aging. What's the age of that tank? What's the projected lifespan of the tank? And will this increase the lifespan, decrease the lifespan? And if we were talking about replacing that tank, what would we be talking about?
All right, so the ground storage tank is actually in much better shape. It is much newer than the elevated tank. The elevated tank was put in 57. That's the powder blue tank that you see at Cottage Street there. That definitely is in need of replacement. We have been looking at options for that. There's some issues with some land easements that are there that have kept us on hold for a while. But the ground storage tank was put in the early to mid 80s, if I remember correctly. I don't have an actual number for that. It's a concrete reinforced tank. It is not exposed to the elements like the steel tank is. So the structural lining on the inside is in very good shape. The exterior does have some discoloration, but it's nothing that a good pressure washing and deep cleaning wouldn't solve. There's no detrimental wear area that's going to happen from this. It's not going to be like having a pressure washer blasting at one spot. It's a gentle cascade sprinkler system that's in there to gently turn the water over. We don't want to create anything violent in there. It's more of an ongoing process that will keep that water continuously moving. And I don't have an estimated cost for replacement of that tank.
Okay. The visual I have is like the lemonade machines in the like a convenience store, like similar kind of process.
That is a very good visual. That would work, sure.
Okay. So just thinking ahead, when we're talking about eventually replacing the elevated tank, is that something where the elevated tank, whenever that is replaced, could be sized or scaled to replace the ground tank as well? Or is that not?
No, unfortunately, they have two separate functions. The elevated tank is for water pressure in town, while the ground storage is basically just for mass capacity. The elevated tank at Cottage Street is 500,000 in the air, where the ground storage at Cottage is 2 million. We have another 3 million gallon ground storage overall from Mansfield Ave. Basically, those are your saving devices if you had massive fires in town. If you had a multitude of failures, you could turn those pumps on and overcome the loss to keep pressure in town, obviously until the water ran out. But by then, you would typically have a response crew in isolating areas. So two total different purposes for the tanks. And as I had mentioned, at some point, we are looking to replace the elevated tank there. And the newer designs have something similar built into them. It's almost like a vortex, so that when the water actually comes in, it creates a whirlpool effect where it cascades from the top down. something completely different from the way things were designed back in the 50s.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
Frank, want to make sure I understand. So this 375 would be coming from general funds. It's not covered by the water sewer receipts in any way?
This would be coming from retained earnings, which would be they're covered by the general receipts. That's the retained earnings are what's left over. We try and purchase small items out of that to keep the balance where it needs to be. When we replace a vehicle or a piece of equipment, it also comes from the retained earnings. So we don't like to see large projects come out of this, but something, even though 375 is not small, in the scope of some of the work that we do, it technically is kind of a small number.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Zach?
Frank, touch on what you said. So where are you? Is there like a state guideline on how much storage you need to have for per capita? And give us an example. You had a pretty good sized fire a couple of weeks ago. Were any of those tanks under stress? I know there was a text message that was sent out by you guys.
Yep. No, we were not stressed. We actually handled that fire pretty well. For the amount of equipment that was here and apparatus and manpower that was on scene, from the start to the end, which went into the following day, they only used about 725,000 gallons of water, which is nothing to sneeze at, but the location of that being directly around the corner from the water treatment facility, we didn't have our booster tanks come on at all during that. The notice was sent out just as a reminder to residents, asking them to hold back, just not knowing how severe it was going to be, seeing that it was multiple alarms.
And the other thing, Frank, refresh my memory from the Capitol meeting. Was this one of the items that you were going to try to put in for federal funds?
You are 100% correct. We did not get approved for the federal funds that we asked for from the congressman for this. We had actually applied for aeration or pumping systems in all of our tanks. Figured if we were going to ask for one, we're going to ask for them all. But Norton was not selected as one of the winners.
Thank you.
And Zach, just to touch back on your asking question about the capacity. Years ago, everybody focused on the largest water main possible and the largest storage tanks possible. And believe it or not, you can actually have too much water on hand, which is half of the issue we're dealing with by having stagnation issues in tanks where you can't turn them over fast enough, but you still want to have it there for fire protection. So this is the next best option. We've actually knocked down the levels that we keep our tanks at. So even though we have a 3 million at Mansfield Ave and we have the 2 million here at Cottage Street, we don't run them to full capacity. We vary the elevations of the water based on the time of year. The colder the water in the wintertime, you can sit on it a little bit longer. The chlorine doesn't dissipate because of the temperature of the water. And then we swap it around. If we know there's an area coming up like we had last summer with a major drought, we'll bring those tanks up as full as we can, just so that if there is any unfortunate incident with one of the wells, we're sitting on a little bit more water as a buffer. So the capacity is really to benefit the town and to manage the system appropriately, but it's actually been recommended by Mass DEP when we're looking at replacing our elevated tank to even go with a smaller tank than what we have now for elevation. You can get the same pressure by holding the water up at the same elevation, but you don't have to have the capacity be the same. So all things that we're working on and trying to come up with a good blend for the final solution.
And Frank, just touching on that, just curious, if there was, God forbid, a natural disaster that knocked out your generators and you were pumping no water, how big of a supply is that you have? Is it 12 hours? Is it 1 day? Is it 3 days? At the current usage, I know seasonally it's different, but roughly.
On average, if we were full when we lost everything, we could go 3 to 4 days. If something like that happened, we would get the notices out. We would start isolating certain areas of town, and obviously focus on getting one of the biggest generators back online as quickly as possible. We do, if we were in a situation like that, have an emergency response plan and manual, and we do have cross connections to other surrounding towns where we could open up attached water mains and hopefully either supply them with water or get water for Norton.
Without state authorization on an emergency basis?
An emergency basis, unfortunately, we would have to do that horrible declaration of what we call the boil. Anytime you have an interconnection like that and you have no control over your chemical feed, that's an automatic requirement.
Even though it's coming from another town that's treated?
100% because they treat differently than we do and they have different sources.
Thank you.
Any other commentary on Article 10? Not hearing any. Mike, I'm assuming you want us to vote on this?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion.
Chairman,
Joe?
I make a motion that we recommend Article 10 for the town meeting as written.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
A motion from Joe, a second from Cody. And again, that's $375 to come from water retained earnings.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion and a second. I go for the vote now. Sandra?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Cody?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
And I'm also yes, so that's unanimous. So Mike, the next one? Is that 11?
Article 11, correct. Frank,
Article
do you
11,
want-
which was mentioned previous. I'm sure you all are aware that we had approval for funding from the congressman for the 3 well replacements, which is 4, 5, and 6. Part of that requirement is that the town has to be able to fully fund the project if for some reason the congressman money disappears, per se. So this is the estimate to replace well 4 from the design all the way up to the final completion. Because this has taken so long, the cost is even higher than it was for a larger well just a year ago. So their estimated cost is $900,000 to $915,000. We believe we can hold it to $900,000. And the hope still, fingers and toes crossed, is that we have money from the congressman that will be eligible to pay this down. What we didn't know in the beginning, and I apologize, I forgot which board I had mentioned this to before. It's been an ongoing process. When the congressman came to Norton and granted us the $1.475 million for these replacements, the amount of strings and hoops we didn't know about. So now this is being treated as a federal grant. So we're getting 80% and we have to do a 20% match. So to get the 1.475 as our 80%, we have to spend more than that. What wasn't told to us is that the engineering costs for wells 5 and 6 and a portion of well 4 are ineligible. Massachusetts doesn't require competitive bidding for engineers. The federal government does. They do not allow waivers, even though Massachusetts is one of the few states that doesn't require it. So the monies that we had spent thus far, moving forward to get 5 and 6 engineered and up to basically where they are now installed and operational, we had automatically assumed that would be more than our 20% match and we would have no issues. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So the possibility is that we may incur costs for the engineering of well 4 and the remainder may come from the congressman. The best answer that we've gotten from the EPA about this is that the 1.475 technically never goes away. What would have to happen is we would have to send a letter requesting a reappropriation of the available funds to Congress for other like projects, which unfortunately everybody knows about PFAS. It's around the corner. It's coming. That money more than likely would be transferred over to some type of removal system if and when we exceed the new regulations that are set up for PFAS. So it's just a few more hoops to jump through that were very unclear to us at the beginning. It's very different from some of the other monies that we've gotten from ARPA and the county funds as well. So we are working with the engineers, we're working with Mike and the EPA to come up with the best possible outcome for this. But either way, we still have to be able to fully fund the project to show that obviously we have the backing from the town departments, and obviously the citizens of Norton for this. I'll tell you right now, well 4 is down to about 80 gallons per minute. It is well overdue for a cleaning that we had to put off because wells 5 and 6 took so long to build and construct. So we are in the process of sending that well out for bidding right now to find out what the cleaning cost will be. Unfortunately, because of that well, and because of the material nature of the ground where that well is drilled right now, it clogs very rapidly. So there's a possibility we may have 2 cleanings before this well is even sent out and located a permanent location, even if this is approved.
So the 900,000 is for a new well 4.
Correct. 100% brand new location from its existing, further away from the area that we believe the soils are heavily impacted with iron and manganese, which caused the clogging issue.
Is there a cost to closing down the old well 4?
It's included with this, so they actually will remove the pump and the structure, and they will cap off the well with concrete.
Okay, so that's included in this.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else for questions on this one?
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
So Frank, sorry if I sound like an idiot, but I'm going to ask the same question. From retained earnings or not from retained earnings?
No, Joe, sorry. This will actually have to be borrowed. This is just a little bit too much to add to something else that we had in the mix here. Getting up when you get close to that 850, that's kind of the cutoff point. So we definitely would want to take this and have it added to the borrowings.
Yeah, based on what you said earlier, I kind of assumed that this one would not be, but I wanted to make sure that was.
Yeah. No, sure. And the intent would be with this to do a short-term borrowing where there's no impact to the department for that first year. If we see that the project is moving forward and there's no delays for materials, no delays to get the contractor out there to do the work, then we could switch it over, if there is no money from the congressman at that time, to a long-term borrowing and begin the pay down on that. The hope would be that everything would fall in line and we would be able to get approval and never have to use this money. We can go back and have it reallocated. Fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Zach?
Frank, a couple questions. Number one, what's the life expectancy of these wells? Is it 5, 10, 20 years? How old are the other ones?
They all vary depending on the depth that you can get them down to. Depending on the size of the well and the depth and the amount that you basically have used the well. So the original wells that we replaced recently, 5 and 6, 5 was built originally back in 1972. Obviously that lasted a very, very long time, multiple cleanings, multiple upgrades to the pumps and motors. Well 6 was actually a fairly young well. It was only built in 1994. Each of those had high velocity pumps that were in them that took a lot of water out in a quick amount of time. With the implementation of the water treatment facility, those pumps and motors had to be discontinued, and we had to go to low pressure, low volume pumps because it takes time for the water to pass through the filters at the treatment facility. So having the different style of pumps and motors in there is going to lengthen the life cycle of these wells because you're not drawing the water from the ground so rapidly that you actually clog the gravel pack with the natural minerals that are there. So there's definitely a benefit, and I couldn't tell you the actual life expectancy. I can just tell you what we've seen here in town. Unfortunately, well 4 was revised, I believe, it was back in 06, and you can see where that one fails rapidly just because of the gravel pack. Well 4 is also down off of Plain Street, down behind the water treatment facility, very close to Lake Winnicott. So there's a multitude of different things that cause the well to fail. Some of it can be screen size. So if you think of a spaghetti colander and the sizes on that, you have multiple different options. The quicker the water goes through is because you have a larger screen selection. Now that we have a water treatment facility, we can actually put in a larger screen size to allow more water to come in because we're filtering out the iron and minerals. Before, when these were raw water wells and they were just being treated on site and not being filtered, our screen and slot size was very small just to keep as much of the minerals out of the system. So a lot of different technologies being added to change the operations of the system.
So you're pumping these wells 24 hours a day. Is the treatment plant 24 hours a day, or is it just during day shift? How is it operating at this point?
They are not 24 hours a day, thankfully, with new wells 5 and 6 online right now. We run them right now. We're in the middle of the spring flushing program. So the wells are running between 9 and 10 hours per day, and then they're off. The opposite days that we have filtration going on, where we have to backwash the filters, we're actually running off our storage tanks. So that's how we get the mix on our ground storage and our elevated tanks by moving the water around there on the days that we're actually backwashing the filters at the treatment facility. When 5 and 6 came on, 5 came on in January, and no, I'm sorry, backwards. 6 came on in January, 5 just came back on in March. We haven't seen a lengthy runtime with all 3 wells to see what's going to change for operations at the treatment facility now that 4 is only putting out 80 gallons per minute. So they're definitely not running anywhere near where they used to when we were basically running almost around the clock to meet the town demands. So we're in a much better place than we were now.
Okay, and touching up on what Joe said, you're borrowing this money, but the payment is being made from retained earnings.
No, the 900,000 would be borrowed.
Correct, but the note being paid, the payment of that 900,000 is coming from retained earnings.
The payment will be part of the normal budget. If this does go to a full payback, it will be part of the normal bond monies that we pay. So it would
So
add to the existing bond.
It's either out of retained earnings or revenue receipts.
Correct.
So is it one or the other? So we borrow $1 million, the money, it's $100,000 a year, whatever it may. Where's that $100,000 coming from?
It goes into the budget. So when Frank presents the water budget
Okay.
for
So
next
it's
fiscal,
coming from revenues from water bills.
correct.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I'm just trying to get at. Not from the tax base on homeowners tax.
No, we're self-sufficient. Nothing that we do here has anything to do with taxes.
I just want to make sure people understand that. Thank
Sure.
you.
Mr.
Anybody
Chair.
else? Cody?
Yeah. Just a question. If the Department of Public Works article passes at town, at the election this year, does that change the structure of funding for, water and sewer if you've got the DPW now?
It'll take some time to implement a DPW. We won't see it this year, but when and if we did go to a DPW, water and sewer would still be enterprise. So any cost attributed to water and sewer is still funded from the rates that the residents pay.
Okay. Thank you.
And Frank, just to circle back to how you began the conversation, that 1.4 million you said was 80%. So we, as a town, you as a enterprise, you need to be spending 1.8, 1.9 in whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which isn't hard to do. It's just, it was very surprising to find out that that's what the intent was when the monies were awarded to us.
Yeah, it's always easy to spend money. Way harder to find it.
Correct.
Okay, anybody else? Questions, comments on Article 11? Not hearing any. So again, I'm going to assume Mike wants us to move this, so I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe?
I make a motion that we recommend the Article 11 for town meeting to borrow the sum of $900,000 for water sewer.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion from Joe, a second from Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go for the vote. Sandra,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes, so that's unanimous.
And if
All right.
we could go to Article 6. This is the article for the sewer enterprise budget. And so the budget is $439,422 in personnel services, $164,947 in indirect expenses. Other charges and expenditures, $1,343,489, and debt service, $403,213, for a total of $2,351,071.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Zach,
So under personnel services, excuse me, we went from 161,021 to 439,024. More than a doubling in 3 years. Can we have an explanation for that? Is there that many more people that we've doubled the personnel in that department?
We added personnel there, and we are creating a full-time lead technician person, you could say, or basically like a sewer foreman. That's going to be added to that. We did bring over one gentleman from the highway. He was transferred over to here, but that number looks higher than what I have on my page, Mike. Actually, no, I'm wrong. Sorry. The eyes aren't working. There we go.
so Zach, I'm not sure that answered your question.
Not
No,
really,
yeah.
but I mean, I'd like to say, to be honest with you, what changed? That's a drastic numbers change, and you got over 100% increase in 3 years' time. Unless, I'm not involved in daily operations of the water department, but I do run a business. And I know what it is to process a payroll every week. So that just seems high to me, Frank.
No, this is a sewer department, just to be clear on that. And
Correct.
we only have a few people there. The people that we have there are senior people, so they are on the top of the wage scale, and they do rotate heavily for the overtime, just because of the short duration of the time there. We can definitely take another look at it. I am short-handed right now with other staff here in the office, but this was not one that actually flagged on the computer. We did work on the water rate that you'll see soon for the personnel expenses on the water, and we had an explanation for that, which I know you had asked about at a previous meeting. But if you'd like, we can definitely look at this and see if there's some fat that can be trimmed out of that and why where it is.
That's not what I'm trying to get. I'm just trying to explain the amount, that type of increase. That's just huge. So
And the system has increased since 2021, the number of
Oh.
users.
Significantly.
Right. They have been expanding the number of users on the sewer system, with the West Main Street project being one of them.
So have the revenues climbed at the rate of this budget? If I looked at, sewer revenues only in 21, and I looked at sewer revenues in 23, we're gonna see a huge jump.
Our retained earnings certified last year were $2,708,000. in sewer.
And what was it in 21, do you know?
I don't.
I have, 1,550,198.
No, that's expenditures, not revenues. I'm saying, what were the revenues for sewer in 21 versus 23, or the latest numbers that you have versus these increases? Do they stay in line?
I do not have that in front of me. I have the current one.
So maybe it's easier to potentially narrow this down a bit. What happened between 22 and 23? Because that's where the jump was in personnel services. So did you double the staff or?
We added one person, I believe it was 2022. We had a gentleman that was out on injury leave. We had a person who was working here at the bottom of this pay scale who actually transferred out to highway. We had a gentleman from highway who transferred here at the top of the scale, and incrementally the lead person, for lack of a better term right now, is at the top rate of the scale. We did hire another gentleman, I believe it was early 2023, and he came in with licenses and came in the middle of the scale. So we do have, like I said, everybody that's there is on the upper end of the pay scale, rightfully so, for the jobs that they perform and what they do. But yeah, the numbers are very high in sewer.
And I think if you, back in 21, they were operating mostly with only 2 people in the sewer out in the field, and now it's 4, correct, Frank?
That is correct, Mike.
Mr. Chair.
Cody?
Frank, I want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. The projected enterprise is expected to exceed this $2.3 million request. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The receipts coming in, are they expected to exceed the budget request? Does sewer pay for itself?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if Mike, if you have a breakdown, if you wanted to show them the anticipated revenue sheet. I'm not sure if I sent that over to you earlier.
Yes, you did. I can show that. Yep, hold on.
So this will be a breakdown of some of the fees that shows the actual use receipts, the permits that fees that come in, interest earned on monies in the bank. Yep. And then to balance the budget, you'll see that we do pull from retained earnings, which is something that we do every year. Sewer is actually a pretty small number that we pull from retained. This is a 21,000 that's pulled to balance that 2351 number. Not sure if that helps you guys out at all.
And you've got, so the retained earnings, that's, you've got that money sitting in account, the 2.7 million.
Correct. It was last certified in 2022.
Okay. And those are dedicated funds that have to be kept within water and sewer, correct?
These actually have to be dedicated to be kept in sewer. They don't intermingle between the two enterprise accounts.
Yep. Thanks.
Yep. Did that help out at all, Zach? I know. Didn't know if that number helps you guys at all.
Yeah, as long as you got it, but I just don't understand like the increase in personnel. But again, I'm not running the day-to-day operation of the sewer plant.
And Frank, is there, I know I asked this, if not earlier this cycle, then maybe last year. Is there a planned expansion, this coming year, and what would that cover?
We do need to get more bodies in to do the basic maintenance work in the sewer department. So again, that's why we're looking to fill a position. We're actually going to be losing one of our senior techs. He's going to be retiring. So we felt now would be the best time to actually change the title on that position, possibly offer a little bit more money. And then we will possibly be looking at filling maybe a laborer's position, which would be a low-end number position, see if we can get somebody in the door. Unfortunately, it's not a very popular job, and you don't find people that are interested in it for the low numbers. I mean, I've done it. It's definitely not something that you look forward to every day, but it takes a special class of person to want to work in that environment and know what you're up against each day. So we definitely do need more bodies, but it's very tough to find them.
Okay. You know, my question was more, thank you for that answer, because it did kind of answer something I wasn't particularly asking. But my question more is there an expansion to the sewer planned for this coming year in, you know, areas of the town or houses or whatever, and where would that be?
All right. Sorry about that. My mistake.
That's okay.
We do have a grant that was given to the town, something that was worked on before the previous planner left. And that's actually it was called originally the Elm Street Municipal Sewer System. And what was supposed to happen there is there was going to be a sewer station designed in the parking lot of the existing highway garage, and it was going to connect all of the new buildings along 123, town hall, police, fire, library, highway, to that, and avoid the town having to build a septic system. This sewer main would actually go out through Miller Terrace onto Elm Street, front all the homes on Elm Street, including Reed and Barton, making its way down towards Reservoir Street and tie into the existing system, gravity sewer system on Reservoir. We have support and we are moving forward with the design. We don't know if we're going to have the same amount of support for the actual construction and if there's going to be any grants or anything given to the town, because there have been recent changes that the town hall has chosen to go with a septic system, basically in the same spot where this sewer facility was going to be built. So there's no major benefit to the committee that awards the grant if it doesn't check off all the boxes. So the properties along Main Street, the existing town hall, the fire station, the police department, the library, what would soon be the new town hall, those are all in what's called critical needs sewer area. So there's a comprehensive wastewater management plan that was developed many years ago, areas that are currently on septic and would benefit greatly by going to sewer. So that was part of the initiative that started the whole process with myself and Paul DiGiuseppe, working towards getting this grant. Now that the major players aren't really still all involved, there's a good possibility that even though we have the grant money for design, that it'll never make it through construction. So it's something that'll be there. We'll have the paperwork that we can fall back on and possibly make a few tweaks later on down the road. But I think my personal opinion and the opinion that we've seen from the engineers working on it are that without everything still being exactly the same as it was when we applied for the design grant, that the construction grant will fall flat. So,
And
Yep.
No, go ahead.
So the possibility for the next area would be Elm Street and Miller Terrace. But again, nothing is set in stone yet. We will be out there doing some measurements and some engineering calculations, all required that we have to submit for this design. And it is paid down by I believe it's ARPA county money. Mike could correct me on that. But there is no expenditure from the town or from the sewer department for this work.
Okay. And Mike, maybe this is a question, not for this evening, but if that whole section of where the, town hall, new town hall, fire station, all that kind of stuff currently was deemed critical need, why would we go back to a septic? And to Maria's point, it may be partially in a flood zone, so we'll disconnect there, but maybe that's not for now.
It's all about timing, unfortunately. By the time the town hall was going to be built and ready to open on paper, we might be a few months behind, if not more, if there's no delays for materials. I think if there was a heavy overlap on time, and we would obviously be done prior to the town hall, which still could happen, I think it'd be a little bit of an easier sell, but it just hasn't worked out in that favor.
I think that's the main thing, is the timing, and the economic driver for the grant is the Reed and Barton facility. So when they start moving forward with that, that'll be the main driver in any grant money, because they want to see economic development in order to provide grant money. And the town hall and the library and the fire station don't add any tax revenue. So, that's not a big driver when it comes to something like this. We'd be looking at a Mass Works grant that they want to see economic development.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Zach?
I'm gonna touch on a little bit what you said, and this may not be for this crowd, but there seems to have an attendance some of these meetings, particularly with the new town hall and senior center. There seems to be some contention about the water sewer department charging connection fees for these projects, and should the water department be charging municipalities? It's kind of like taking money from one pocket and putting it in the other, and then maybe more politics are playing it than anything else. But I'm not sure. Frank, is that common practice in other communities for the water department to charge the town hall, for say, for water or connection? Isn't it kind of like taking money from one pocket, putting it in the other?
I honestly don't know 100%. I've spoken to a few different people, and I've gotten about 10 different answers from that. It really does seem like it more or less would be a wash, but it's all about what's fair and what's equal for everybody. If we have to charge a resident to connect, it only makes sense that we would have to charge, any entity to connect, and obviously their use on top of that. I'm all okay with it either way. It's all about what's fair, and I know the board has had a lengthy discussion about this. And, same thing, they see it both ways. So I understand the question and concern, but, again, the enterprise accounts, they run as a business. They're not, able to hand out, continuous product for nothing. And it basically, now you're putting the burden of the fees that are going to be waived only on the ratepayers of that utility. It's not being absorbed by every single person in the town, which, again, I can see it both ways.
That's coming up next, Mr. Chairman, after we do Articles 6 and 5.
Oh, well. So getting back to, and I now forgot what article number this is.
Article 6.
6. Are there any other questions or discussion on, there we go, the 2.3 million, I'm rounding down, budget? Not hearing any. So again, I'm going to assume Mike wants us to, vote on this. So I'd entertain a motion for Article 6.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe,
I make a motion that we recommend Article 6 for the annual town meeting for the sewer enterprise budget in the amount of $2,351,071.
Second.
so I have a motion from Joe, a second from Cody. Mike, it's okay that we just moved it at the total, or do we have to move each line?
You can move, if you could, just read each line.
Okay.
You don't have to vote them, but just read it.
Okay, so I have
I can read it if you want.
okay, go ahead, Joe.
Make a motion that we recommend Article 6 of the annual town meeting for the water sewer budget for $439,422 for personnel services, $164,947 for indirect expenses, $1,343,489 for other charges and expenditures, and $403,213 for debt service, for a total of $2,351,071.
Just to clarify, Joe, that's sewer only.
Sorry, did I say water? So sewer, oh, I'm sorry. Let me
Second,
get the numbers right.
So I have a motion again from Joe, a second from Cody. Any further discussion? Not hearing any. So we'll go for the vote. Sandra,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I too am a yes.
Okay. And if we could go to Article 5, let me get that up.
Are you able to go to the breakdown page, Mike, like we had on sewer?
That's what I am looking for.
I believe it's that one if it'll turn.
Okay. I'm looking for,
There you go. Oh, go back.
no,
Are you
did I
looking for
go?
the final number? I was
I'm
looking for
looking.
the full line breakdown.
I'm looking for with indirects. Well, here's the budget if you,
That has the indirects in it.
Yeah.
But you took away my color code and made it easier for me to see.
so,
Me.
personnel services, $1,242,231. Interfund operating transfers, $529,826. And charges and expenditures, $1,347,500. And debt service, $1,602,990 for a total of $4,740,547.98. So it's the budget is actually a little smaller than last year, Frank.
Yeah, we went back and John and I went through this and we hammered on it pretty heavily. The biggest question that was presented before was the salaries, wage, and the overtime item. So you notice that that's been dropped down by a good chunk. So what had happened there, and it's different from the sewer. I know it makes sense if it transferred back to sewer, but when the wells 5 and 6 were offline being revamped and the water treatment facility went online, Mass DEP required that we had operators run the plant manually for 3 shifts. So there were shift incentives that had to be added on top of the wage increases for the licensed primary and secondary treatment operators that were there. So that's where you saw the big jump that happened at the end of 22 into 2023 with the budget. So the reason the number was high the last budget is because we transferred it over because there was some rumor that DEP was going to make us have to basically start over by replacing wells 5 and 6 as having 2 brand new sources going into the water treatment facility. It was a complete new learning experience for us, having the amount of water that's there now completely different from the way it was before. But Mass DEP did grant us the waiver to operate 1 shift during the day, 1 shift Saturday and Sunday, and all other shifts would be remote, providing there were no major issues that had happened during that first year. So now that we've come out of that grace period, so to say, and performed as we should have, we're able to take those contingencies that we had in place out for the 2nd and 3rd shift overtime rates and the additional rates that would have been there for other staff having to come in. So you didn't run into what's called a burnout schedule. So we would have had to have other technicians that are licensed appropriately, water technicians, actually cover the weekend shifts there, just to give the treatment operators a break so that they weren't working continuous cycles. So that's how that number was able to be lowered for the salaries and the additional gross overtime numbers that were there. So the numbers we have in there now, knock on wood, we think are pretty tight, but we think that we're comfortable with them, provided we don't run into a situation, unfortunately, with that wonderful thing called PFAS. If we have to change our treatment techniques and our filtering techniques, more than likely we will have to go back to a manual operation for a duration of time to show that the system is working correctly and that somebody is actually there in case an alarm comes in. They don't want to grant the 1 hour response time to basically a new treatment technique. So if we have to change this, if something happens to our sampling and we do come up with a PFAS number, or they do actually start enforcing it, which I'm told could possibly happen by the end of this year, we may see these numbers change in the fall meeting.
And forgive me, PFAS, is that the forever chemicals or is that something different?
No, it's one of the contaminants that is part of the forever chemical list per se. Right now we test for PFAS 6, which is 6 contaminants out of the whole family. Those are the ones that seem to have the majority of issues. There are more than 1,000 different types of contaminants listed in those tables: PFAS, P4, microplastics, Gen X. There's a list that goes on and on and on. At some point in time, the federal government will step up and make us do testing for all the additional chemicals that aren't being tested for now. And they kind of already have us in the scheme to do that. So we do a round of samples, multitude of samples. I believe it was 60 or 70 samples, which is called UCMR. So it's unregulated contaminants. And basically anything that they find in those rounds of samples, they will send off to other laboratories and try and come up with action levels or detect levels that they would actually at some point make a standard. So that's how PFAS 6 was generated. Somebody spent some time, looked at all the data that was collected in certain regions of the Northeast as well as the rest of the country, and that's where they come up with those numbers. So we generate the information for the federal government to look at what contaminants are in groundwater, and they determine which ones they want removed and basically require us to do such a thing.
And I know the last time you were in front of us, was that a month ago or so? The federal government had yet to set the limit, but you thought it was going to be incredibly low. Have they set that limit yet, or is that still up in the air?
It was set. It is not being actively enforced. So it went from the federal standard, correct me, I could be wrong, was 70 parts per trillion. Massachusetts chose to lower it to 20 parts per trillion. The new guideline for PFAS, P4, and 2 other chemicals is actually 4 parts per trillion. The way that they calculate those numbers is very difficult to explain. It is a long mathematical equation that I could definitely explain, but it would take up more time than we've already spent here. And I would say 3 out of our 5 wells would exceed based on those calculations, and that would trigger public reporting requirements as far as public notices going out. It would trigger notices that would have to go into the newspaper. It would trigger educational meetings, and additional information would have to be provided on the website with links and everything, and possibly some type of temporary remediation system if we couldn't blend to get below the numbers that they want, like other communities have had to do. So you'll see if you look through the budget, some of the biggest items that have jumped from last year are actually the laboratory fees, unfortunately, the system materials, the chemicals, and the 2 biggest ones are the advertising and the data processing costs. So just to put one public notice out, which we've had to do for THMs, it's about $4,200 each time that has to be sent out. And if they require us to do that at each location that exceeds and don't give us the opportunity to combine them all in one report, we're really starting to roll some serious numbers here. And in my opinion, it's being spent the wrong way. we can definitely educate the customers on it, but to send out the public notices when that money could be put into an account to be used to actually spend to remove it as far as for a filter system, hopefully the EPA has taken their 60-day review period and taken them and listened to some of the comments that operators have given to them. Not just concerns as a budget standpoint, but also as a scaring point. You send these public notices out, people read 2 lines and they don't read any more. You need to simplify it for the public so that they understand, yes, it is dangerous. Unfortunately, it's been there for 80 years. And yes, everybody has been exposed to it at some point in some way, shape, or form, but it's not going to be removed overnight. And unfortunately, it's not going to be cheap to remove it either.
And so they've set the limit, but it's not being enforced. Do we have a guesstimate? Yeah, yet.
The 60-day review will be up in May. I believe it may be May 5th, so it's right around the corner. I would be very surprised from seeing how quickly the federal government acts to see anything implemented immediately. And some of the recommendations, I know a recommendation that I had to them was to possibly start it off as a tier system, start us off a little bit higher, something that most people can achieve, and give us time to work towards, a goal of putting in a GAC filtration plant or possibly a reverse osmosis plant. I mean, all of which you're talking millions and millions of dollars, not just in the actual money to build it, but where are you going to find the place to put it? That's our struggle. We had to shoehorn our water treatment facility in on the property that we have now because there were Native American restraints in that area. The same plant to treat the same amount of water is going to be the same size. Now we don't have a place to put it, and you have to remove the iron and manganese before you remove the PFAS. So you need both plants. It's just, there's a multitude of layers that should be happening, and it doesn't seem to be working in the water community's favor right now.
Fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the committee on the water budget?
Mr. Chair.
Cody?
I'm just looking at Article 5 as printed in the draft warrant that I'm looking at, and the numbers not matching the updated budget. So I don't know if we can move and vote on recommendation, or if we need to have that amended first.
No, when you make your motion to approve Article 5, use these numbers as that we have in front of you right now.
Yeah, these numbers are actually just finalized today. The interfund numbers came down on Friday. I was actually off, and we actually finished this budget and got it back off to Mike and Michelle this morning.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, not hearing any. I'd entertain a motion on this article and the water department budget, specifying that the motion should detail each segment as printed before us.
Correct. Personnel services, $1,242,231. Inter-transfers, $429,826.
Is that 400 or 500?
With $529,826. Charges and expenditures, $1,347,500. And debt service, $1,620,990.98.
For a total of $4,740,547.98.
Correct.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe?
God help me here. I I make a motion that we recommend Article 5 for the annual town meeting for the water enterprise budget in the amount of $1,242,231 for personnel services, $529,826 for intertransfers, $1,347,500 for charges and expenditures, and $1,620,990.98 of debt service, for a total of $4,740,547.98.
Second.
So I have a motion from Joe, a second from Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go to the vote. Sandra,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I too am a yes. So that's unanimous.
All right. Oh, what do you know? There it is. Is that? All right. So back to Article 12. So this is the article that Zach was referencing previously. This is an article put on by the select board to see if the town will vote to amend the bylaws to exempt all town buildings and facilities, new or existing, from the payment of water and sewer tie-in or related fee requirements, or take any other action relative thereto.
So
Mr.
that,
Chairman,
Zach,
just for the record, I had no idea this was even on here. I just, I just flew in on vacation, so I hadn't even seen this.
so Mike, this is
Yeah.
just for the tie-in and fees, but not for the actual usage of water/sewer? Or is it the town buildings don't pay anything?
This is for, I believe, and is just for the any connection fees.
And it, the questions probably can't do justice, but on average, what does a fee, what does that run for a building or a house or whatever?
It all depends on the size of the service going to the dwelling. I can give you some examples. A regular water service to a residential home, a 3/4 inch is $3,500. A 1 inch is $4,500. That's the water connection availability fee. That's for the life of the property. We charge that one lump sum fee at the time of installation, and that water service stays with that property basically until that property is either altered or destroyed. Those monies go for upgrading the system when we have to do a water main project, installing hydrants. Basically goes into the general receipts. The larger and that you go up, they do get pretty significant. An 8-inch tie-in is $50,000. Again, it all goes to the infrastructure improvements. Every time we add something to the distribution system, it requires additional maintenance and obviously additional water to be able to supply through those structures. So I can definitely understand, like I said before, I'm not opposed to it either way. The board had some different, options or thoughts about this. They were very worried that it would be the usage fees that were also being waived, which would be highly unfair to all the other ratepayers. As far as the actual connection fees, I believe, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we had permit fees that were waived prior to me taking office for the water treatment facility. Is that correct, Mike?
280,000 to be exact.
There you go.
Yes.
So it seems like in the past, it's not too often that either one of the entities actually build new large buildings that would require connections. So I don't think we're talking about something that happens on a regular basis. If it is just related to the actual connection fees, we're looking at pertaining to water just in general right now. Now, as far as the sewer tie-in, that's something that's totally separate with betterment costs and all that. And typically, if you're going to have a large sewer system put in like we did on West Main Street, and the primary reason that went in was to remove the schools from the sewer because they were going to be penalized by Mass DEP because they were failing on their nitrate count. They had some skin in the game. They had to put in a large chunk of money to make it even feasible for the sewer department to pick that up, along with 120 West Main Street. It wasn't just the schools. Both entities required those replacements to be done, and that's why that project actually moved forward many years ahead of its time.
Mr. Chair?
Paul?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Frank or Mike, is this also gonna be, again, the bigger pipe sizes, Frank, is generally because of the sprinkler requirements. Is that also part of this for the town buildings?
The way I'm reading that, it does seem that way, Paul. It looks like they want to remove those fees. So we do have annual maintenance fees that were added. I believe that came in after the Station Night Code fire, prior to me taking his office again. But there were changes that were made that anybody that has an existing sprinkler system has to pay a portion of the fee for continuous availability for water. And that's broken down with a quarterly bill along with your regular water usage bill. So definitely, we need a little bit more clarification on the article. I think it's very vague and could be misleading both ways, either to or for it, to or against it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman?
I heard Joe first.
Thank you. Frank, you mentioned, I think you said $50,000 for an 8-inch. For the town hall, do you have an estimate of what size we're looking at there?
Town Hall, I believe, had an 8-inch line that was going in, and they also had a separate domestic line. So we don't allow domestic lines to be tied into the fire lines just because of the lack of movement in a fire system, and there's no way to flush that system. So what we require is 2 separate connections to be made directly to the actual water main in the street, and then that water service and fire line are brought in separately to the building and connected independently. So there's 2 separate taps that would be required depending on the size of the building.
Okay, and so in dollar and cent terms, what would the new town hall be charged for that connection, those connections?
You can just open up the thing to get you accurate numbers. The 8-inch service fee is $50,000, and I believe they were looking at, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, was it a 4-inch domestic that was going in at town hall or smaller?
I don't recall, but I think you're correct. I think it was a 4.
4 inches, 20,000, guys. So, again, it's for the life of the property, for maintenance to the system, far beyond usually the life expectancy of those locations. But, these charges have been in effect since 2016. So it's something that we haven't altered in a very long period of time. Again, for town buildings that aren't built on a regular basis, if it is just the connection fees, I don't think it's detrimental to anyone. But again, we do have to remember that any fees that are being waived are being passed off to the ratepayers in that specific group. If there's a water fee, just round number, 100,000, that's getting waived for, 2 town buildings. That's a pretty big chunk of money to throw on the ratepayers to absorb. If it was a sewer connection fee that's being waived, that is actually probably more impactful because there's so few sewer customers in town. Just, again, not trying to sway anybody's opinion, just throwing some facts out there. All stuff that has been mentioned from the board to be presented if possible.
Thank you.
Zach?
Well, touching back on what I was talking about earlier, not knowing this was here. This is also, correct me if I'm wrong here, Frank. There was an article, I think it was last year, from the school department to tie in as part of that field project, to tie in the high school and the middle school to the sewer, and that was floating $500,000. Rough numbers. So that means you would absorb, if this was passed, the water department would have to absorb $500,000?
No, first, that would, just to be clear, that would be a sewer. Water and sewer are completely separate.
Well, that says water and sewer, that article.
Right, we're talking about for the schools, it'd be the sewer.
Yeah.
What has to happen at the schools is we put in the West Main Street Sewer Project. We left stubs for each school, one for the Yale School, one for the high school in 2 separate locations. Currently, the infrastructure that's there, based on previous work that was done, has the high school waste go through a pump chamber, runs currently underneath the new ball fields over to the Yale School, goes into a pump chamber there, and then the liquid waste is ejected out into the system. The solids still have to be pumped based on the infrastructure that's on their property. So the amount of work that has to happen on both of those properties is all on the private land. It has nothing to do with the infrastructure that's already installed and currently available in the street. So what has to happen at the schools is both of those pumping systems first have to be capped so that they don't loop underneath the new ball fields that were just installed. The high school would need to have a different pump installed, and they would have to run sewer main from that pump chamber out to the stub that was left at 123 near Freeman Street. The Yale School would also need to upgrade their pump chamber so that it can pump liquid and solid waste, and then that connection would also be out to the street so that they are basically completely out of the wastewater business, and there is no active line going underneath the new ball fields. That's just for those 2 schools there. If they choose to connect the middle school, where the sewer treatment plant that they have there, which I believe last I heard was still really on the ballpark of having issues with the numbers, they would need to modify the sewer treatment facility that's there and make it a pumping facility. And there was going to be some checks that were being done, I believe, before Joe left, to verify that there was plumbing actually installed many years ago in the form of actual sewer main from 123 out to the sewer treatment facility out behind the school, to make sure that it was fairly simple to do that connection other than the infrastructure improvements on site. So that's something that's totally separate from what's going on and the betterment costs for connecting to West Main Street.
Yeah,
Just 1 second, Paul. So
Yeah,
what
go
I'm
ahead,
trying to get at, what I'm trying to get at is, you got a potential of 3 schools, a senior center, and a town hall, some watering, 2 with watering sewer, 3 with just sewer. What would the impact, real ballpark numbers, what would the financial impact of this article be to the water department? Is it $200,000, assuming all those 3 projects?
It wasn't.
I'm sorry, maybe 5 projects.
Yeah, right. So the Yale School and the high school were in as part of the connection to West Main Street. They were based an assessment based on their involvement, as was 120 West Main. So there wasn't, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it wasn't like a set connection fee. It was an agreed upon price based on the amount of impact that was going to come out of it. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't know if Mike remembers anything off the top of his head, but there were substantial numbers that were given from the school and from 120 West Main in order to make it work with the sewer department putting up the rest of the money, just for that project to even work out. And I know there were changes that had happened over the duration when they ran into ledge, and they did have to go back and ask the state for additional funding in order to make it even further where they get stuck down near the Honeydew Donut area. But
So
I
you don't
honestly,
have a number.
I don't have a number. If I was to take a wild guess, I would say you've got to be close to the $200,000 to $300,000 range. But that's really just a ballpark, throwing it out there.
Would that include repaving the streets and all that other stuff? That's
So
once you dig things up?
we took care of the streets, and we have the stubs that are off of the main road beyond the sidewalk. So that wouldn't be affected as far as in that number. It would be whatever the infrastructure costs are to upgrade the systems. And the biggest cost there would be pumps and motors, but again, it's private. we only own up to the shutoff or up to the property line. So what you're talking about are kind of two different things. The connection fees that we would get, which we did get as part of this project, which I'm ballparking are the 250, is totally separate from the infrastructure work that has to take place on the grounds in order to make their structure capable of removing all of the waste from those locations.
Yeah, what I'm just trying to get at is the financial impact of the water and sewer department of this article. So
There
thank you.
definitely would be an impact. Without any hard numbers, it's very hard to imagine that.
Mr. Chairman.
Paul?
Well, yeah, Mike, it might be part of what you might be getting into, but Frank, when you say that there's an impact to the ratepayers, let's just use the town hall. That's 70 grand, 50 for the fire connection, 20 for the demand for the 4-inch line. That is strictly the fee, and if you didn't build a town hall, you wouldn't get that 70. That's not something the ratepayers are actually absorbing, because it doesn't exist either way, whether you build a new one or not. You're still going to be making out on any connection that you make, the physical work and all that's going to be covered. So there is no real direct cost to waiving the direct fee. It's just not money that's going to be there down the road as far as additional, if you will, in your retained earnings or whatnot. But it's not really a direct cost to the ratepayers directly for it. So it seems a little bit off. It's just funds that aren't going to be available down the road. But it's not something the ratepayers are absorbing per se. So I just thought that was a little bit different spin on that.
No, I appreciate that. That's definitely a way to look at it. Like you said, I'm not opposed to it either way. These are just some of the things that were brought up speaking with the board. And there is some level of impact. Maybe it's not the exact dollar amount, but adding infrastructure and expanding our infrastructure that we have, not taking any monies back in that could be spent, whether it be immediately or in the future. Obviously, there's an impact there. And unfortunately, we've seen what's happened with the economy. Something that used to cost $10 is now $30. So, those numbers that we have in place, even though they are significant, it all affects our bottom line and what we can and can't do moving forward for other projects. So maybe direct impact isn't the right word, and I appreciate you saying it like that, because it does open it up a different opportunity to look at another way. But there is definitely some type of impact. I just don't think it's major because of the amount of limitations we have for both of our buildings. You're not going to have 5 new schools built in the next 10 years. You're not going to have another town hall built. So I think even though there is some impact, and same thing with the wells and the treatment facility. Yes, at some point in the very near future, we will be building additional treatment facilities. That's inevitable. Hopefully the town, if we go through this article, would waive those fees as well. One hand wash the other.
But again, to kind of what you're saying, but then trying to minimize it, there is a cost to water and or sewer for doing infrastructure improvements that we're waiving for certain buildings, but not for ratepayers in general. So that cost, and I guess to me that's kind of the key. How much are we trying to just say, oh, it's a town hall, it's a municipal building, so let's waive it. But if I'm on water, but I'm not on sewer, but that waiving for them hits my pocket in some way, shape, or form, whether it's significant or small, it's still hitting the resident.
Mr. Chairman?
This,
Just a couple things. On the West Main Street sewer project, we're still obligated for the development of that sewer.
I'm hearing an echo. I can't understand what's going on here.
Hello?
you're echoing.
Can you hear me?
Mike, do you have like your computer and a phone on, or?
I don't.
It's echoing on you, I think. Try again.
All right. So we're obligated to the 1.6 million for that construction on West Main Street. We'll be paying that till 2041. Just to give you an example on the fees that we're talking about. So the water receipts are $4,240,344 anticipated. Permits, lease revenue, miscellaneous fees is only 300,000 of that. So waiving these fees that we're talking about isn't that major deal.
Mr. Chair.
And it's not, that's all 300,000 anticipated from all projects that need to be developed town next year.
So, if I can, I wanted to kind of, first of all, Frank, make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, because I've done some research into particularly the sewer connection fees or assessments, depending on whether or not grant money is used, public funds are used for the laying of the lines. So, essentially, the cost of laying the lines is a completely different capital expenditure for that project and has absolutely nothing to do with the connection fees or the tax assessments or the betterments for anyone that's along the line that has to then connect to that sewer. So if you use public funds, then there's a betterment assessment and that becomes part of your tax on the home, and it's collected that way. Versus a private line, it's a sewer connection fee, and it's not an assessment. It's a sewer connection fee based off of a calculation using gallons per day per bedroom, whatever. So those fees don't go directly towards the that project itself. It then goes into the funds that Mike was just saying. Those are collected and then they go into the enterprise, the capital enterprise, and retained earnings, right? So they just become part of that calculation.
They're used to pay down the bond for all projects that have been taken from day one up until that most recent project. So there's always a revolving number there as the projects start to get paid down. You pay more towards principal, less on interest. So you more than likely the monies that are coming in are paying down the first projects and they're coming off the books. And as the additional funds come in, it pays down the last project. But basically it's a revolving door process just like that, correct?
Right. And then the calculation, so like the homeowner calculation is different than like say commercial or industrial. Those calculations, because the residential is done off of bedrooms and usage, and commercial and industrial it's based off of whatever different projection, because it's not based off of bedrooms. So though I think that's an important distinction on the assessments or the betterment or the connection fees for the town properties that are then connecting into it. It's not going towards the actual project itself. It goes into that fund. The other point that I wanted to make is, or at least the question, because I think that the way I understand it, say we're talking about $70,000 for the town hall for the connection fees that would then go towards water and sewer for the town hall if we were to charge the town those fees, the connection fees. That would then be considered part of the amount that the town has to borrow against to pay towards. So then we're going to pay interest on top of that for paying ourselves. So that's where I think if that's correct, and my understanding is correct in that, I think it would be foolish of us to charge ourselves and then pay interest to lenders for paying ourselves, if that makes sense. So that's where I think, to me, that's an important distinction here. I personally think that the way that this is worded could be cleaner, and I'd like to see it cleaner because I don't necessarily think that we shouldn't be paying our share of, say, the, the usage fees for water and sewer, because that becomes part of the upkeep, and you're not having to borrow that money. That becomes, allocating the usage based upon, the town hall using it, or the senior center using it, or the schools using it, whatever it is. That's just transferring monies internally, is the way I see it. But I would be opposed to charging ourselves money that we then have to pay interest to somebody else on.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. The only thing that's different is it's actually not charging ourselves, where we are enterprise separate from the town or from the taxpayers. So again, we run both our enterprise accounts as businesses. We sell a product to a consumer, regardless of if it's the town or the resident. And that's why fees are appropriated to each individual, whether those rates are antiquated, too high, too low. Those are stuff that was set in place long ago. Like I said, 2016 is the last time those rates were altered, according to the paper I have in front of me. But again, each person should be paying their fair share. And again, this is not just my personal opinion. This is also coming from the board. And like I said, we've spoken about this at great length. If it wants to, cut a fee in half or something like that, so there's still something coming in, because there's always infrastructure improvement that has to be done. So the money that comes in that we get from bills, and you can see what the retained earnings are each year. We have to take money out of our retained account to balance the budget. So we're not making money hand over fist. If we were, we'd have zero money being transferred each year from retained earnings, without doing major rate increases or anything like that. And we're in the end of, I believe it was a 5-year rate increase now, because of the addition of the water treatment facility, the additional operators, and the costs of the well. So everything that we do, has a cause and has an effect. That's also where the numbers came in for the connection fees, knowing that you'd have a quick lump sum of money that could be used to pay down something, and other monies would be available at a later date to do infrastructure improvements. We're not going to take that 70,000 per se from town hall and go out and do, 500 lengths of pipe. That's just not the way it works. It's used to pay down the debt. Or if we had a real bad year and we didn't collect a lot of water receipts like we did during the start of the pandemic, those retained earnings are there to offset the cost, because we still have to pay our bills no matter what. So it just gets into a situation where you have to be very careful running a business. And I have to keep saying that because, sometimes I have to remind myself the same way. We're not funded by the taxpayers. We're self-sufficient by the ratepayers. And it has to kind of be looked at in a different mindset sometimes, with the amount of people that we have in water compared to the amount that we have in sewer. So each department is affected differently, if those upfront costs don't come in per se.
So, just a question to that point. I guess two questions. The first, the last calculation update that was done on sewer betterment assessments and connection fees, I think, was the Winnicott project, which was 2014, 2016, somewhere in there. I think that's probably the one you're referencing for the sewer connection fees. I don't know what it would take for us to review that. I know there was an outside party that had to do the report on the last time, so might be time to re-up that. But on the issue of the collection of the service fees, to Mike's point, it's a small number in comparison to the actual usage fees. And I would expect that the usage fees are really where you're setting apart and your retained earnings and planning for future maintenance and projects like that. And, if maybe Zach would back me up on this, I think on a business sense, if you're not getting it on the fee side and you maybe need to increase your rates, maybe that's part of the conversation, but ultimately that's where then the town is going to pay its fair share for the actual usage, as opposed to collecting it in a one-time lump sum that we then have to pay interest on. That's my 2 cents for what it's worth. As far as this article goes, I think it needs to be cleaned up so that we're not necessarily saying we're not going to pay for water or sewer usage, because I think those would be considered fees, and there's potential here for the interpretation of that to say, well, we don't have to pay any fees, including usage. And I think that's probably, that's where you don't want to push it down into the other users, and the town gets all of theirs for free, and you got to push down and increase the rates on everybody else because the town's using too much.
I think that was well put, Cody. I appreciate that breakdown. Most definitely. The other concern, and again, not to keep this going on as long as it is, as buildings are built now, they're very efficient. So you may get that lump sum money up front, which again is helping pay down some of the debt, some of the budget expenditures that are there. You don't see a lot of high usage from brand new buildings. They're designed that way specifically. You see it from some of your older infrastructures that are aging and failing. To have a brand new building go in, I would be very surprised to see a water bill generate any type of significant resources for many, many years at a brand new building, whether it be the town hall, the senior center, even with a very populated building like a school. The newer schools, they don't leak, they don't have antiquated heating systems, they're very efficient. So it goes back to the point where you had mentioned the rate study, and unfortunately it is something we are going to have to look at moving forward, as there is a significant amount of building that's going on in town. Everything is very efficient. So, I think unfortunately the rates will need to be adjusted. And you did touch on the Winnacunnet project. Oddly enough, we actually have two different sewer rates right now in town to connect. The betterment costs for the West Main Street were $16,000 per EDU, whereas the Winnacunnet cost, which is what we go by right now for any existing sewer connection, is based on the Title V bedroom count for a 3-bedroom house of $11,550. The reason the board held off on making the adjustment, even though it was recommended previously by the rate study professional and the engineers, is to allow other residents that hadn't connected yet, before those people, they were notified and they knew they had a connection time of 5 years. This is before the change of town meeting. It wasn't fair, and the board didn't feel it was fair to basically penalize those people for waiting the duration of time until they had the money to do the tie-in and pay the $11,550. I imagine how much of a shock it would be if you had 2 months to go and the board took a vote and changed the rate from $11,550 to $16,000 just to be compliant with the current regulations. So that's why that still hasn't been changed yet. It is in the works. We do have to do rate studies and we do have to do assessments. So at some point in the very near future, that will be looked at and adjusted, and the water rates are going to be wrapped into it as well.
Thanks, Frank.
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
So I just want to throw a slightly different spin on this, because I'm looking at it a little bit differently. We established earlier in this meeting that we expect water and sewer to pay their own bills. We asked questions about retained earnings and all those sorts of things. I understand what you're saying, Cody, about not wanting to pay money on interest that we're paying ourselves. But A, I don't think we're paying ourselves, because again, they're trying to run it as a business. But B, to me, it's almost a wash, because the money that we would be taking is paying down debt on the water sewer side that is costing interest. So, I'm not sure that that's an argument that weighs well. It doesn't sway me, I guess is what I'm saying, because there's interest on one side and there's interest on the other. I think that since we as a town and we as a board or a committee are expecting water sewer to pay their own way, I have trouble waiving fees for that. So that was it.
Mr. Chairman,
Zach?
we could go on with this one all night. I mean, this is, let's call, for those of you who know me, I speak my mind. And what this is a political issue. This is not really with this committee. What's trying to go on here is, the taxpayer allocated $37 million, whatever that number was, for town hall senior center. And that included the water, and now they want to find another $70,000 they can spend someplace else. I get. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. Now we're playing a political game of, whack-a-mole. But I do have a question for Frank. Frank's an interesting business, by the way. Don't use too much water, because we can only draw so much, but we need to sell water to pay the bills. So, It's a catch-22 over there at the water department. Don't turn on your sprinkler. Do you pay for the town hall when you do a project, whether it's a sewer tie-in, whether it's a well, street work? Do you have to get a permit from the building department?
The engineers pull the permits if necessary. We do Concom reports and all that. We have been charged by conservation to do all the public postings requirements, notice to abutters and all of that. I don't believe we have actually had to pay building permits, but Concom, when Jennifer was here, that was definitely a bill that we would pay.
Okay, so my question, not to get too far in the weeds. You want to bill them, but you don't want them to bill you. Where do you go with this? That's why I said this is highly political. I'll leave it at that.
I'll throw one other thing in there, Zach, because I was looking at the same thing, because there is a line item in the water and sewer budget for police detail. I think it was $15,000. So I see the point. I was tempted to make the exact same point. It's like we're all one town. It's all one facility, and we're paying one side versus the other. The only thing that, I come back to is if we're essentially from one side or another, right? I understand that, water and sewer is an enterprise and it's got to be run that way. Maybe there's a negotiation with the town where the connection fees are different or whatever. It's outside of the debt service. I just think that, building that in and every little bit counts. If we can come to some sort of arrangement on that where we don't have to necessarily fund those fees through debt, that's the only point I'm making. But you make a good point, Zach, and I know that there's town chargebacks for police and fire and everything else that goes into the water and sewer, and it's back and forth. I prefer not to have to pay tax or pay interest on something that we can just, if it's just an allocation charge between departments, that's fine. I don't think that's as big of a deal. It's just the, paying interest on it that I take exception to. That's it.
Great discussion, I gotta say. But I think when we get down to the nitty gritty of it, I heard several people kind of indicate that the wording, the way it was written, left too much to interpretation. So even, no matter what side of this argument any of us fall on, it still comes back to the devil is in the details, and the details seem a little skimpy. So I don't know, as Zach said, we can talk about this all night, but I'm not sure any of us want to do that. But as written, do we have any appetite to vote on it? Or we can move it and then vote accordingly based on the way it's worded currently.
Mr. Chair, can
Yes.
I just ask, maybe we can get a little more clarification, both maybe on tightening up the wording and also, Mike, they have this number built into the current estimates for the town hall senior center, correct? Like it's already in there as assuming they're going to pay it, or did they assume they weren't going to pay it? I forget where we left it.
That's a good question. I'll find out.
Okay. And I don't know if there's any other arguments that I'm assuming, I know this has been a discussion at PBC. If there are other arguments that have been brought up that, I haven't been on it too long, so I don't know if I missed any discussion. I think there was some prior to me joining about what their rationale was. I mean, obviously they want to pay as little as possible, but I don't know where they landed in terms of factoring in or not factoring in.
Okay.
Sure.
Was
was me.
that Joe?
Um, I agree with Sandy, and I think what you were kind of alluding to. I would prefer to get clarification on this before we vote on it. I think it's worded very poorly, regardless of which side you might come down on it. I would like to see clarification on, you know, the fees and the maintenance and sort of a breakdown of all those things and what the expectation is there, rather than sort of the generic wording that we have currently.
But at this point in the game, Mike, because I'm not sure, can the wording be changed if it needs to be, or are we at the point where this is the wording? So, you know, clarification or not, anybody can go back if this is the wording to say, well, this is what it says, and it doesn't say that. So is it too late if we were to say it needs to be cleaned up to actually clean it up?
So the warrant is finalized, so the select board could change the wording, or if the article went forward like this on the town meeting floor, someone could also amend the wording there. But right now, I will check with town council and see about some clarification on the wording.
Okay, then I'm more than happy to let Bonnie deal with this.
Mr. Chairman,
Is Zach?
can I offer a suggestion here to Frank? You know, I don't, again, this is not clean. There's a lot of issues with it. Instead of even putting this article up there, can you go to, I don't know when your next Water Sewer Commission meeting is. Is it this week, next week?
May 9th.
So, I mean, can you go to your board and say, hey, guys, let's have a compromise. Offer a one-time exemption to the City Hall and Senior Center for their sewer, for their connection fees, and take this article out altogether. One-time exemption as a goodwill from the water department, and let's be done with this. And just vote no action on it. That's what I'd like to say personally. If you can bring that up to them and come back to us, I would appreciate it.
I will bring that up.
I agree, and I think that's a good idea, Zach.
I agree as well.
So we're not voting on it tonight then. So, okay.
Well, Frank's not off the hook yet, though. We got our other article.
So Mike,
As if one mic wasn't bad enough.
so Mike,
Go ahead.
may I suggest, and I don't know if this screws up this meeting at all, but while Frank's maybe talking on the next article, that you try to sign out and sign in again, because the echo is pretty significant, and I don't know about anybody else, but I'm like trying to ignore every other word, because that's, you know, it shows up 2 and 3 times everything you say.
All right, I'll do that. And Frank, special town meeting, article 4 is next.
Take it away, Frank.
All right, let's see what I can do here.
See if I have it.
Exactly, I have to find it as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can share it either.
I've got it here if you want me to
Okay.
share.
Please.
Yeah, if you can, Joe.
Let's make sure that I have the right one. You guys see that?
Yes.
You make it bigger and wider.
So did he say 4 or 5?
Yeah, he said 4.
Okay.
So we do not have any budget shortfalls. So more than likely, as in the past, there'd be no action on that article.
On Article 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
And typically,
Then-
Article 5, I think, follows for sewer.
Yep.
Same thing, no shortfalls. Knock on wood.
Okay.
Where are we at? 6.
No, that doesn't look
Nope,
to
that's
be
not us.
you. So, okay, so Article 4, we would basically vote no action since you're saying you don't think you're gonna need it at this point?
That is typically what happens, or it just has a no action clause at town meeting.
So, Chair would entertain a motion to vote no action on Article 4 of the special town meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe,
I make a motion that we take no action on Article 4 of the special town meeting warrant.
Second.
so I have a motion by Joe, a second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Sandra,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach.
Yes.
I'm also a yes, so that's unanimous. Article 5,
Mr. Chairman,
Joe,
I make a motion that we take no action on Article 5 of the special town meeting warrant.
Second.
so I have a motion by Joe, a second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Take a vote. Sandra,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Have we gotten Mike back?
Yes.
Awesome. And there's no echo.
And the next article is Article 9, which also will be no action.
Are we done with Joe or I mean Frank?
Frank, are you still there?
I am still here.
So Article 9 was, is the article for Stephen Street and Peter Street.
Correct. We chose to take no action on this at this time. It's a relatively short stretch of 2 small roads, and the cost came back at a whopping $1 million. Again, we know prices have gone up. We know that there's problems getting certain materials, but we just didn't feel it was appropriate to spend this amount of money at this time in that area, especially with other projects we have that are already moving forward. So this will be tabled for a while. We're not going to take any action on this one right now. Hopefully in the near future, if material costs come down a little bit, we can bring this one back up again.
Okay. So Chair would entertain a motion of no action for Article 9.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe,
make a motion that we take no action on Article 9 of the special town meeting warrant.
Second.
I have a motion by Joe, a second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Take the vote. Sandra,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. So again, that's unanimous.
All right, Frank, that's all we have for
Pretty
Frank.
sure.
Well, thank you, Frank.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Have a great evening.
You as well, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
So do you want to get back to some budgets?
Sure.
All right, these you already voted at the last meeting. And then I did not realize I had sheets underneath those. So this is the first reserve fund 150,000, same as we've done in the previous years. Legal services, 70,000, same as we've done the last couple of years. Tax title foreclosure, 30,000. My recommendation is a slight reduction. Elections, 32,900 is the recommendation. Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development, 4,000, and the town report, 2,400.
Does anybody on the committee have any questions to any of these 6 budgets?
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
Mike, under elections, you said, I'm confused by the negative.
I can see what's confusing. So elections, the request is 32,900. And what you're seeing there is on the right, it's just a change, I don't know, from her previous. So FY23, her request was 56,000.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why calculating out and showing that, but that's what's confusing you.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Cody?
Mike, there's a, correct me if I'm wrong, is there still a planned auction of foreclosure properties planned
There
for
is.
this fiscal year? And that 30,000 would be towards that, and would proceeds from that go into the general fund?
Correct. So right now, the treasurer collector has an RFP out for a auctioneer, and she has several properties that she wants to auction off, and then that money would go into the general fund, any sales that we make.
And then the other question I had is on the elections, the 32.9. We're not in a national election year, right? So I remember it was the machines, right? The machines were included in that.
So that's why it dropped from 56,685 down to the 32,900 this year, because there's not as many elections.
Yeah, but the 32,000 is inclusive of 2 new machines that will be purchased.
I believe those were in capital.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, any further questions or discussion on this page? Okay, Mike, do we just move the page, or do you want each?
I would accept the page as presented.
Okay. So Chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
Before we do that, I have a question. Mike, do I
Yeah.
need to read each amount, or can I just say the page as presented?
I would say I would make a motion to approve the page from Reserve Fund 132 through Town Report 195 as presented.
I make a motion that we approve the page as presented for Reserve Fund 132 through Town Report 195.
Second.
So I have a motion by Joe, second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go for the vote. Sandy?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Cody?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
Okay, next we have postage, $52,550. Sailor of Weights and Measures, $2,600. Street lighting, $40,000. And sanitary landfill, $14,000.
Any discussion or questions on this page?
Mr. Chairman,
Zach?
is the 40,000 for the street lighting for the electricity, or does that include maintenance and repair? And if so, who's handling that? Is it the highway or you have a subcontract?
It includes both. It includes the electricity cost plus any repairs needed. And we contract that out.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair. Just
Was
a
that
point.
Cody?
Yeah, it's Cody. Mike, just, if there was new lighting going in, that would be under capital, not under the operational.
Correct. We still have money left in the article where when we purchase the streetlights. And so if we have to add any new streetlights, that comes out of that.
And Mike, what's the annual savings now? I mean, it seems substantially lower than when we're renting it from the utility.
It is substantially lower. I think we were up over 100,000 previously before we went to all LED lights.
And just as a little education, what determines if we need a light somewhere?
We
Is that-
have, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We have a public safety officer at the police department, and if someone raises an issue about safety at an intersection or something where they don't think there's enough lighting, they'll go out and review it and report back.
Okay. Any further discussion? Not hearing any, so I'm going to assume this page would follow the same format.
Correct.
In a motion.
Mr.
So
Chairman?
I'd entertain it. Joe?
I make a motion that we accept this page of the budget as presented from postage, all departments 199 through sanitary landfill 438.
Second.
Motion by Joe, second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go for the vote. Sandy?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yeah.
Cody?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
And next we have Select Board 122. So the salaries are 74,300 and expenses 2,400 for a total of 76,700. Town manager 123, personnel services 300,387, and charge and expenditures 42,850. Town accountant, personnel services 242,109, and purchase of services 29,000. Charges and expenditures 34,200 for a total of 274,529. Assessors, personnel services 209,393. Charges and expenditures 39,225. Treasurer collector, personnel services 267,945, and charges and expenditures 57,511 for a total of 325,465. Data processing personnel services, 42,482, and charges and expenditures, 372,500, for a total of 414,982. And town clerk personnel services, $130,055, and charges and expenditures, $10,150, for a total of $140,205.
Any questions on this page?
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
Mike, under data processing,
Mhm.
there's a fairly large reduction from the request. What got left out?
So what got left out was one where in the capital plan, we're going to a new permitting system. And in this budget, they had the previous system in there for costs for that. And also taking out money for purchase of new equipment, which was also in capital.
Okay, so we did approve that that new software system for the permitting.
That was in the capital plan, yes.
Great, that sounds like it'll save just a ton of time.
And some of the other departments on the salaries, it was just miscalculation when they were going through. And in the town accountant's office, he is looking for a new part-time person in that office who will be coming in at a lower salary than the person that left.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay, for these, do we have to move them first personnel and then each segment, or can we just move the page?
You can move the page, just as you did with the others.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
Joe,
I
And-
make a
and-
motion.
before you make the motion, I guess for minute's sake, I'd make it a little more difficult, and I should have said that before. I would just say what's on the page.
Each one?
Yeah, and you don't have to do the numbers or anything, but at least who was in this page in
Mhm.
case if it ever changed.
I'm good with that. I make a motion that we approve this page of the budget, which includes select board, account 122, town manager, account 123, town accountant, account 135, the assessors, account 141, treasurer collector, account 147, data processing, account 155, and the town clerk, account 161.
Second.
So I have a motion by Joe, a second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go for the vote. Sandy,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
I too am a yes.
The next page, we have the Conservation Commission, Personnel Services, $137,232, and charges and expenditures, $22,500, for a total of $159,732. Planning Board, Personnel Services, $131,833. Charges and expenditures, $8,175, and a total expenditure of $140,008. Municipal building maintenance, charges and expenditures, $162,375. Police Department personnel services, $3,820,856. And charges and expenditures, $238,545, for a total budget of $4,059,401. And the reduction there is in police overtime. Fire department personnel services, $4,278,029, and charges and expenditures, $272,400, for a total of $4,550,429. And also in the fire department, it's a reduction in overtime and some reduction in some of their expenses. And emergency medical services, $218,050, and emergency planning, $9,000.
And for both fire and police, the chiefs are good with the reductions and will make it work to the best of their abilities at this point?
They will. They,
Okay.
yep.
Mr. Chair.
Was that Zach?
Yeah, a couple of questions. What is emergency medical services? What falls into that?
That is the ambulance service. So all the medical supplies and equipment.
But doesn't that come out of the ambulance fund, not the general fund?
No. It comes out, well, the ambulance fund, we appropriate money out of the ambulance fund that is just in all the different revenue sources that we have. So
Okay, and
700,000 or whatever we approve out of the ambulance fund goes into the budget as revenue.
when I look at personnel services on any of these budgets, what exactly does that include? That includes their salary plus the payroll taxes, everything except benefits. What exactly is in that number?
So personnel services is salaries, overtime.
The payroll taxes in there too?
No,
Where do those fall in the budget?
what's that? So for fire, for example, it's salaries, any part-time wages, overtime, longevity, incentive pay.
No, I got all that, but is the payroll taxes part of this, or is that a separate line item someplace?
No, that would be in the treasurer's budget. 940.
Well, Zach, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I'll have to, when we get to that, if I haven't got into it already, I'm just curious how that
Okay.
is calculated in a municipality.
Okay. Anybody else? Not hearing anyone. So again, I'm assuming we can move the page detailing each department. So I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe,
I make a motion that we approve this page of the budget, which includes Conservation Committee account, commission, committee or commission? Account 171, Planning Board, account 175, Municipal Building Maintenance, account 192, Police Department, account 210, Fire Department, account 220, Emergency Medical Services, account 230, and Emergency Planning, account 240.
Second.
that's a motion from Joe, a second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go to the vote. Sandy,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I too am a yes.
Okay, next we have inspections department. Salaries, $240,499. Charges and expenditures, $18,625 for a total of $259,124. Communications, our assessment of $300,000 that goes to SEMREC. Animal control, personnel services, $91,859. Charges and expenditures, $14,080 for a total of $105,939. Highway personnel services, $879,898. Charges and expenditures, $139,050. Surface treatment, $13,000, and repairs to private ways, $1,000, for a total of $1,032,948. Snow removal, $80,000, and then Board of Health Personnel Services, $184,010, and charges and expenditures, $10,200, for a total of $194,210.
Any further discussion on this page?
Mr. Chairman,
Joe?
Mike, under the Highway Department Personnel Services, is that
Mhm.
overtime? Is that a person or part of a person? What was the reduction?
The reduction is the anticipation that we have a retirement of the top guy, and the person coming in will come in at a little less.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Cody?
Mike, on the inspection department,
Mhm.
can you explain it's a 13.3% increase year over year? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the building commissioner became certified this year, so his salary increased, and also estimated increases for the part-time inspectors. We're going to be coming to you, I think, at the next meeting for a reserve fund transfer. We have part-time inspectors that are paid by inspection, and this year we've gone over what the estimate was on that, which is a good thing because they brought in $700,000 more than we anticipated in anticipated receipts through permit fees. So in thinking about next year's budget, we're also looking at the possibility that they're going to continue on that trend, and we've increased that somewhat.
Thanks. I recall now we had discussed with Nick about adding the person, and good for him for getting certified.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing no. I would,
Mr. Chairman,
Joe?
I make a motion that we accept this page of the budget, which includes the inspection department, account 241, communication center, account 290, animal control, account 292, highway department, account 420, snow removal, account 423, and the Board of Health, account 510.
Second.
Motion by Joe, second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go to the vote. Sandy?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Cody?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Next up, we have public health nurse, $40,300 and $10,250 for expenses. So a total of $50,550, and we're still looking for a public health nurse. Council on Aging, $138,000 for personnel services, charges and expenditure, $30,540, for a total of $168,540. Veteran Services, $98,056 for personnel services, charges and expenditures, $3,750, and veterans benefits, $200,000, for a total of $301,806. Library, my proposal was $532, and if I could, I did meet with Bob Berg last week, and Bob's very concerned about the trust fund, the status of the trust fund, and being able to stay open 45 hours a week. And so my recommendation, I would change based on my meeting with Bob Berg. It would be $36,259 additional in order to keep the library open 45 hours a week. So the number would be $568,997. And
Can you
then
repeat that?
Yep. $568,997.
And that additional 30 some odd $1,000, I'm trying to recall the conversation that, or the presentation Lee made. Wasn't she trying to go from like 45 to 50, or she was trying to increase hours?
She was trying to go to 50, but I explained to Bob right now, I don't know if we can do that. Hopefully, he really wants to look at doing that in the future, but this would at least keep the 45 hours.
And again, I'm trying to recall the details of that presentation, because there were some benefits to getting higher and higher in hours of operations. So by staying level at like 45, does that lose them anything?
Mr. Chair,
Was that Zach?
yeah, I believe that they would lose, if they reduce hours, they might correct me if I'm wrong, they would lose their sales, it's a program they're in, the sales on the libraries and sales certification, and they would become uncertified, and people couldn't go across different libraries and a bunch of other things. So I think they're trying to protect their certification. To make a long story short.
But that's if they went under like 40 hours or something. That they were trying to get from 45 to say 50 because it was going to add some benefit that they currently don't have, or they were trying to maintain. I don't think it had to do with losing sales, because that would have been below 40. So I kind of forget what Lee was trying to do, and I just want to make sure that we're not causing a bigger problem without her being here to just verify.
Mr. Chair?
Tracy?
Yes, she was trying to go up to 50 hours to increase the state aid to 12%.
Okay. So by staying at 45, whatever level we're at, we'll maintain. So we're not going to lose any state aid, but we're not going to gain any, which is what she was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. And the last one is recreation, $28,249 and $17,550 in charges and expenditures. for a total of $45,799.
And jumping back to Council on Aging, that was adding someone
Yeah,
part-time or something?
Yep, I did have a discussion with Beth on this and understanding where she's coming from, and as they get ready to move into a new building and the amount of work that they have, I told her that we'd look at in the fall to see if we could do something for the second half of the year, which would be anticipation of getting someone on and trained to help out in the future. Right now, we'll continue to fund her staff person that was part-time and is on here as part-time. We'll be funding it as a full-time position using ARPA money for another year. So that's why we're able to reduce that. And Beth is also looking to add another part-time person. We have put in here, Beth was looking at 2 van drivers, 20 hours a week, each of them. But we're put in this budget right now to see where the program goes. We'll have 1 van driver, 18 hours a week. So 6 hours, 3 days a week, more or less. And see how that works. And then in the future, look and see if we have to expand that. So hopefully in the fall, we'll be able to add another part-time person to help out with the program. But right now, we'll continue with the outreach counselor as it was. We're funding in the budget her assistant as part-time, but it's really full-time because we're using ARPA for the balance and then Beth's position.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
Mike, on the library increase,
Mhm.
I fully support, by the way, but where's the where are we gonna get that $36,000 from? Who's losing out?
I would propose taking that from free cash.
Okay.
What's the balance of free cash pre and post?
So free is 1,548,392, and when we were looking at using $1,082,782, that brought us down to $465,610. So we'll still have roughly 430,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Zach?
Mike, just something here from the previous page. I know we already voted it, but when does the grant money end for the fire department that we have to pick up those salaries? Is that done with next year?
It's done.
What does that affect?
It's done in March of next year.
And what is that going to be affect the budget next year's?
That's why we've added, we're taking another 100,000 out of ambulance receipts. And then the following year, we'll be taking another additional 100,000 out of ambulance receipts to fund it for a full year.
So it's around $200,000?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Cody?
Cody. Yeah, Mike, I'm just curious how this plays out with the library increase. You're suggesting pulling from free cash. But when we looking ahead to next year, and when we're comparing next year's budget to this year's budget, we were already looking at a shortfall in the budget. And I mean, how is that fiscally responsible to pull from free cash to account for an ongoing budget that next year, I mean, it's just gonna put us further in the hole next year, right? If costs continue to increase and we're limited to 2.5. Is that right?
So, yeah, so this year we have that $1 million train payment. That does start declining as the years go on. And we're also hoping by next year, I know they just got good news that one of the solar systems is about to be turned on. So I'm hoping that once the solar is fully up and running and we start getting some of the credits to help us with that debt, if we didn't have that $1 million this year, we'd be in pretty good shape. So once that starts taking effect, I'm hoping that that's going to help out the budget next year.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any further discussion on the items on this page? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe?
I'm gonna propose the library ones separately because of the amount change, and then do the rest if that's okay.
Okay.
I make a motion that we approve the library budget account 610 in the amount of $568,997.
Second.
Have a no, let me back up. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Go for the vote. Sandy,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I too am a yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe?
I make a motion that we approve the line items on this page of the budget as follows. Public Health Nurse, account 522, Council on Aging, account 541, Veterans Agent, account 543, and Recreation, account 630 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Joe, a second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Go for the vote. Sandy,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I too am a yes.
Next are the schools. Norton Public Schools, $33,998,943. Southeastern Regional, $1,717,885, and Bristol Regional Agricultural, $116,000.
So is the superintendent, I'm not going to say happy, but able to deal with the loss from what they requested in the Norton budget?
He knows what the number is, and I haven't heard otherwise.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Was that Cody?
Cody. I'm wondering if we would get to hear from him of what, because the requested budget at 36 million versus the recommended budget at 34 million, rounding up. is, 2.36 million difference. I think whenever he presented to us earlier this year, he mentioned that it's absolutely can't come out of special ed, so it's gonna have to come out of general ed. That's a lot of money. I'd just be interested in hearing from him or somebody what those cuts are gonna entail, from what he's requested, versus what we've got to give him.
Yeah, I can guess one line item has to do with transportation, which is a line item we've played with the past couple of budgets. But the balance, yeah, I'd be curious.
I'll reach
what-
out. I'll reach
Oh.
out to him.
Okay. So I guess we'll keep Norton School budget to the side for a meeting or two. But we still have two others that we can discuss, vote, whatever the committee's pleasure is.
Mr. Chairman?
Cody?
Yeah, so, my understanding of this is we have nothing to discuss because whatever the assessment that they give us is what we have to pay. Is that right, Mike?
It is.
Must be nice for them.
Mr. Chair,
Zach?
kind of on the same note that Cody just met, so even with the public schools, we have nothing to discuss. I mean, unless somebody's got an extra $3 million lying around in their coffee can, or if you're willing to eliminate the fire department or the police department entirely, there isn't much we're gonna do here. I mean, we can hear to the, I can tell you right now what Joe's gonna tell you. It's not good. I mean, we can kick it down the road if you please, but doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we all know where we are.
From my temporary position, as a one meeting chairman, yeah, I'd like the superintendent to come here and make it known for anybody who actually watches us, or for anybody who comes back to review the tapes or review the minutes, to hear it. Because yeah, I agree with you. I don't have 3 million in my can here, so there's not a whole lot we can do. But this is a bigger issue that I think we need to discuss. In that, yep, and unless we have exponential growth in this town, the tax rate goes up 2.5%, but these budgets, some of them far exceed 2.5%. So you're always going to have this growing imbalance.
Mr. Chair?
Paul?
Yeah, so one of the other things that we're missing here too is that there is a $1 million train payment that is for the schools that's coming out of the budget outside of here. So that's money that's not available. I'll throw in there as well. And again, it's not their fault that the things didn't get put online in time so we can reap some better benefits from it yet and stuff. But that was a huge hit this year, and it almost created a need for an override just to try to keep everyone happy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, I've said this before, and I said, I appreciate the new growth and always trying to bring business in, but short of building the Las Vegas Strip on East Main Street, you can't keep up with 10% a year increases on a 30-some-odd million dollar budget. You just can't. It's just unsustainable. It's unsustainable to the tax base. You couldn't ask the residents for that. It would never go over. So, I mean, something else has to give, and I don't know what that is, and it's probably far beyond this committee.
But it is something that we shouldn't shy away from having a discussion and having it out in public. And so, yeah, it, in the one hand, I can see it's a waste of time to Joe's, life. But on the other hand, again, if anybody's listening, if you want to fund the schools or you want to fund this or you want to fund that, where's it coming from?
And if I could add, when you do talk about, in the fall, we're hoping we're gonna add to some of the budgets. But we still have to keep in mind that we shouldn't be at whatever gets approved in May, plus what gets approved and added to budgets in October shouldn't exceed 3% total, because we just don't have the revenue to keep going above that.
Right. It's kind of it's a simple math problem.
Mr. Chair.
Was that Cody?
No, it's Cody, sorry. So it's a political hot button in town. You bring up school spending, there's a perception by some in town that there's some excess or unnecessary spending in schools, that there may be efficiencies to be gained or excesses that we don't necessarily need to spend. I know the state keeps increasing mandatory, like statutory spending on certain things, especially around special education and stuff like that. We've got quite a few eyes and professionals looking at the school budget on a regular basis. I don't necessarily see where the excesses that some people think exist would be. And I think it's worthwhile to have the discussion in the open, in public, recorded for everybody to see, and have Joe present on exactly what is going to end up getting cut. Because we don't have the money, because we floated the override word, and that's essentially the only way we're going to catch up is by doing that without some massive layoffs and increases in fees and reductions in services. Like you said, it's a simple math problem. Incoming, outgoing, and right now, what we're told has to be outgoing, and what the state says that they will give us based on some really complex math that none of us are qualified to follow along, and that's why the superintendent exists, tells us that we're not paying enough in our tax rate for them to give us more money. So that's part of the issue, and I would just, in the interest of not pushing the political hot button and allowing another, political issue coming out of full disclosure coming from the schools on what services are cut and are no longer sustainable because the budget that was needed to sustain them didn't exist because we didn't have the money to pay for it. I would just like to have that available for everyone to see, so that the discussion's had on the front end. And, for the 4 members that aren't here tonight, I think it would be beneficial to have them available to the extent that there are, for that discussion. So personally, I'd like to kick the can down the road. It sounds like you'd like to kick the can down the road and put it on Bonnie's plate. So that would be my recommendation and my preference if we want to go that route.
And just to make it clear from where I'm coming from, I'm you hear this us versus them. I'm not trying to have a discussion of town versus school. Again, I think it's a very simple math problem. It's, you're either growing to the Las Vegas East, or the budgets, all of them collectively can't be exceeding what that 2.5% does, because it just you can't handle it. So it's not the town side, it's not the school side, it's Norton, it's all sides.
The formula sets us up for failure.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would caution everybody is, let's stick to the numbers. It's a hot button political issue, as Cody said. Let's stay out of the politics. Let's leave the politics for the politicians and just stick to the facts and let them all do what they want. We'll leave that for the elected folks.
I hear you. So, did we vote on Southeastern? And
We did not.
we did not. Okay. So any further discussion on this page, on this topic?
Mr. Chairman, I would just leave this whole page unvoted for. Let's talk about education as a whole and kick it to the next meeting. My view.
All right. Bonnie can yell at all of us then. So 10 o'clock, I was kind of kidding at the last meeting that I was going to, run this for all hours. Mike, is there a lot more or what?
We could hold off, or we could continue with the fixed and shared expenses.
Looks easy enough.
Okay. So first we have the debt. So we have the maturing principal on the long-term debt, $2,951,578. And the repayment of the temporary loan, $74,904. So our total on that portion of the debt is $3,026,482. Then the interest, and the interest on the long-term debt is $1,666,452, and interest on notes, $32,254. So a total of $1,698,706. Employee benefits, personnel services, which is the Bristol County Retirement, $3,927,425. Health insurance, $8,424,000. Charges and expenditures, $600,000. And Zach, that's the payroll taxes. Unemployment, $75,000. And then miscellaneous fuel expenses, $150,000. And charges and expenditures, $888,345, for a total of $1,038,345.
Any questions on this page?
Mr. Chairman?
Just one, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Zach.
Mike, do we want to wait till all this budget pans out before you come up with 75,000 for unemployment?
We could, but we could also, that'll get us through to October, I'm sure.
Okay, as long as it works that way, that's fine. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
Mike, under employee benefits,
Yep.
The second line you said was a retirement?
So under employee benefits, the first line is retirement.
Okay.
The second line, the $8,424,000, is health insurance.
Okay. How do we get away with the $300,000 shortfall on health insurance?
The reduction
The
Yeah.
holiday?
No. So I reviewed what the treasurer had calculated. And I believe that she had calculated it before we knew the rate was coming in at 1%. And, so that's a reduction,
Okay,
calculating at the 1%.
got it. All right, thank you.
And it still takes into account any possible movement.
All right, I just want to make sure that we're not shorting people on their health
Yep.
insurance.
Mr. Chair.
Cody,
Mike, just for clarification on the miscellaneous charges and expenditures, what's captured within that?
That's all the insurances for the town.
Right.
okay, anybody else? And to mirror what Zach said, you know, I was kind of looking at the unemployment also. But if nothing else, we can revisit that line item if other information comes in that makes it an unrealistic number. Any further discussion?
I
Okay,
guess, just quickly, what you're alluding to there is if we have to do layoffs in the schools, that 75 isn't gonna cover it. Is that what you were getting at?
well, I know when this was presented weeks ago, I tried to get a calculation as to how that number comes to be. So I guess, you know, should something happen where we are recognizing, we gotta lay off X number of people, I guess I'd like someone to revisit from the town how that 75 is calculated, and will it be sufficient to cover, you know, what may be being proposed. For now, you know, based on expenditures through December, it seems fine. But
Mr. Chairman,
Zach,
so to Cody's point, if somebody told you they needed 3 million and change, and you said, well, we don't have it, and then you found out after the fact, we laid off nobody, we got by without the $3 million, would they have a credibility issue? So that's kind of, you know, that would be a bigger issue than not having the money to begin with. If they said, no, we didn't have the $3 million, we didn't lay off anybody, then the townspeople would say, I think there's a bigger problem. That's
Right.
all I would say to that.
right. Anybody else? So I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe,
I make a motion that we approve the budgets on this page as presented, including maturing debt, account 711, interest, account 750, employee benefits, account 910, unemployment comp, account 911, can't talk anymore, miscellaneous, account 940.
Second.
so I got a motion by Joe, a second by Cody. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Sandy,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes,
Paul,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes,
I'm also a yes.
Well, I think we could, stop there and, all we have, let's see, the rest can wait till the next meeting. There's a few no actions in the special and a couple articles, but they can wait until your next meeting.
which is
Wednesday.
Wednesday for the public hearing?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'm good with that.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Mike, is the rail trail, is that still gonna be on the special? And is there any more information on that you can send
Sure.
us?
Yep, all that, the rail trail is, it's for engineering cost. We need, more money, to cover, some of the oversight during the project. I believe it's 15,000 we're on that. And then another article we have is for the replacement of the traffic signal out in front of the fire station, which will be covered by insurance, which will go into the general, into the general fund when it comes in.
Okay.
I know
Um,
someone asked me about the bike trail. They're like, that's gonna be approved at the town meeting. I said, no, the bike trail is already under construction.
I was just hoping it wasn't a
Building
big item.
No,
for the-
no, it's a small number. He's working with, the alternative transportation on, the development of the signs, the graphics or whatever they have to do for the development of the signs and just anything else that, we may need oversight on.
So I'm out in North Washington building out the sidewalks today.
Yep.
It's gonna be good.
Mike, just total budget, what are you doing, 3% each? 3% of the town and 3% of the schools? Is that what it boils down to?
On the budget that we have right now,
Yeah, your proposed budget, what is the total increase percentage to
No.
the town and to the schools?
right now. Let me find it.
Schools was 2%, roughly.
Yeah, and the town is 1.6 and the schools are 2%.
Mr. Chair, I just had a quick question.
Yep.
There was a gentleman on earlier tonight, Matt Grenier, and I didn't hear him speaking or anything, and I just don't know who he represented, or is he just a citizen at large and joined us? Anybody know or anything? I thought maybe he was there with the water or sewer or something, but he didn't say nothing, so,
No.
okay, thank you.
Paul, he's a secret donor, he wants to write a $3 million check.
Yeah, there you go. We'll take it, Zach.
All right then. Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you Wednesday.
All right, see you then. Thanks.
Awesome.
No motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'm gonna
Gonna leave it open
punt.
for Bonnie.
I'm going. I'm gonna punt the minutes to Bonnie because I don't feel like dealing with them at this hour. And hopefully I didn't mess up anybody's name too badly. So with that, yep, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, got a motion by Joe, a second by Cody to adjourn. Sandy,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Zach.
Yes, and good night.
I too am a yes. Thank you all, and I guess see you Wednesday.
I hope you all have a good night, everybody.